The current state of Agile conferences and the reason that we're all here, I think, for in our own ways, is that white and Asian speakers tend to be overrepresented at Agile conferences, while Black, Latinx, and Indigenous speakers are underrepresented. There's a saying that monocultures die and diversity thrives. I imagine that everyone is here tonight because, in our own way, we all want to see more diversity among people speaking at Agile conferences, so that the diversity of our world is better represented in the diversity of our conference speakers. And the Agile community as a whole will thrive as a result of that increase in speaker diversity. Tonight, we're looking to focus our dialogue on two key things. One, how does the conference submission process work? Part of this discussion will include how conferences evaluate the diversity of speakers who apply. And for this first part, we've brought in a few experienced conference organizers and public speakers to share their experiences with us. The second key thing we're hoping for tonight is to hear from you in the audience, like the potential speakers. More specifically, what's your experience been like if you've applied to conferences? Or is there anything that prevents you from wanting to apply to conferences in the first place? Our hope is that by hearing from you, it will benefit conference organizers who want to increase speaker diversity but aren't sure how to help. Finally, in the interest of hearing from as many people as possible tonight, we're going to use what I'm calling the newcomer rule. And it's basically that if there's two or more people who are wanting to share something during the discussion, my request is that we give preference to the person who hasn't spoken yet or hasn't spoken as much. So with that, what I want to do is, Nicole, just a quick check. Should we just go ahead and jump in and continue? Okay. So we'll go ahead and have the guest speakers introduce themselves. And so this is Lisa, Julie, and Kevin, and then hopefully Lizzy if she's able to join us. So please just whoever wants to go first, please introduce yourself by saying a little bit about your role, how long you've been in the Agile space, and a little bit about your speaking or conference organizing experience.
I'll go first. I'm Kevin Stevens. I live in Buffalo, New York. I'm the conference organizer for Agile 2022 in Nashville this summer. I've been in software since years started with one, and doing Agile specifically for at least the last 10.
I can go next. I am a speaker, and I like to go to conferences because they're fun. I miss them, but I even like virtual conferences now that we don't have alternatives to that. And I'm also, I haven't been a conference organizer for the big Agile conferences, but I've been a reviewer a couple of times. And I'm also a reviewer for the Business Agility Conference in New York. And wait, there was a second question we were supposed to answer, right? I'm forgetting it.
Yeah, just a little bit about maybe how long you've been in the Agile space and your speaking or conference organizing experience, Lisa.
Yeah, so I've been in the Agile space for about 8 years now. Before that, I worked in the training field, so I did a lot of public speaking, presentations, teaching for my whole career. So when I switched over into the Agile, being an Agilist, I started going to conferences, and I thought, well, I'd like to speak at a conference. It took me a long time, I think, 4 years, I think, of trying before I finally got a talk accepted somewhere. So it didn't happen right away. So it does take a bit sometimes to break in. But I found the meetup format to be a great one as a way to practice and get feedback from people and improve.
Go. My name's Julie Wyman. I'm based in Arlington, Virginia. Had the opportunity to work in the past with Nicole, which was awesome. And I've been working in the Agile community for about the past 10 years or so, speaking at conferences probably since about 2017, I would say. But very similar to Lisa, really started by engaging with my local meetup community. Because I enjoyed it, because I like to. And then through that was able to connect to some other conferences. And then at that point was able to eventually get to participate in some of the Agile 20Xs and the global Scrum gatherings, but still really enjoy getting to participate in a lot of the regional conferences and meeting a lot of the different Agile groups that really organize them, and seeing the different flavors of conferences and the different kind of feelings that they have. And the virtual shift has been interesting over the last couple of years. So that's been a different experience as well. Yeah, and I've done some solos, but I've also, one of the things that has been, I think, a little different for me is I've done a lot of paired presentations. So I really enjoy collaborating with people, and I often lean towards doing workshops. And because of that, it's great to have a second set of hands. So a lot of my experience has also been co-facilitating with people. So I'm happy to speak to that as well.
Thanks, Julie. So I think that covers our guest speakers. Now, in addition to the folks who are the guest speakers, we also have some people who are here and know in our audience who are experienced conference speakers and conference organizers. And hopefully we'll get a chance to hear from at least some of you tonight when you feel inspired to join in. So next we're going to turn it over to Nono, who's going to walk us through some research and the findings of some research that the Women in Agile Africa group has done.
Thanks, Matt. Just a quick correction. The research that we did was via the New African Voices. So it's specifically a group in Sub-Saharan Africa, not the Women in Agile Africa.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Nono.
No problem. So just quickly, what exactly is New African Voices and how did this research come about? So they're a group of four diverse, it's a diverse group of Agilists, and all of us are from South Africa. And we were actually formed as a result of the racial equity series. And then we broke off and formed a group in South Africa. What we wanted to find out specifically in South Africa is why we weren't seeing some of our colleagues and peers from Sub-Saharan Africa submit talks to the conferences. And also, once we got those answers, we wanted to know, how do we bridge that gap, if possible, and how do we make that possible? So some of the insights that the audience or the research participants shared was that they don't necessarily submit their abstracts to conferences because, one, the application process is daunting and the logistics behind the submission process are not really clearly understood. The second thing is that there is a perception that the Agile community is exclusive and you need to be well connected for your submission to be accepted. Third, new speakers are unsure of the value they add or topics they should speak on. 4, some topics are already owned by subject matter experts. So people feel if this well-known person speaks to user stories or the Connectful model, me as a new speaker, what value could I possibly add there, and what would I have to teach the listener? And then 5, specifically new speakers of color are concerned about making their submission perfect so that they do not reinforce any negative stereotypes. So those were our research findings. And what I'm really hoping for this evening is for the speakers and the panelists, if any of those issues could be addressed, I'm sure it would go a long way. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
You're
Nono.
muted, Kevin, if you were
Yep.
speaking.
I think I'm the only one here on the panel that's on a conference organizing committee. So I'll try and, at least right now, so I'll try and speak to as many of those as I can. So
Actually, hey, Kevin, can we pause for just a second? We had
course.
one more guest speaker join us, and I want to make sure that everyone knows who she is. Lizzy, are you there? I know you're just joining. Are you?
There we go. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, so I wanted to welcome our other guest speaker here tonight. Her name is Lizzy Morris. And so, Lizzy, when you're ready, if you'd be willing to introduce yourself by just share a little bit about your role, how long you've been in the Agile space, and any speaking or conference organizing experience you want to highlight for everybody.
Hi, everybody. I apologize for joining late. For some reason in my head, I had it that it was 6 o'clock my time, and I was about to take a nap. And I looked at my phone to set the alarm so I'd wake up, and I saw the message. I went, oops, okay, let's go. So I do apologize. So I've been in the Agile space now since 2007 was when I went to my first Agile conference. And I have spoken at Agile kind of smaller regional Agile conferences. I've done more probably in India than I've done of the actual Agile stuff on the US grounds. I have to say, it's quite horrible to hear that list actually, because those are all the things I used to think. And that's exactly how I felt. So the things I have done in Agile spaces have actually been because my white counterparts have said, Lizzy, come do this. No, don't worry about it. Just do this. And it works. And that's why I've probably done more speaking in the North American space during, I want to say 2021 and 2020. Prior to that, no. And it just seemed out of reach. It still seemed, as much as I've been in the industry a long time, as much as I'm a CST, I'm supposed to be a thought leader and all these kinds of things, it still has this premise of feeling out of reach that there's only certain people who speak and certain people who are always picked to speak, which is why it's always the same speakers. And that thought process appears to have empirical evidence. That's just truth, right? It just appears to have those facts. So if it is going to change on a consistent basis, somebody will have to make sure it's different on purpose and not just assume it's going to be different and assume the system works, because the system doesn't work and welcome people who look like us, sadly. And when we feel the way we feel and see what we see, it's not a good thing. So we're going to have to do something about that to make it different. And I think we can, but we'll have to, because otherwise it's going to look like the only reason we were speaking was because of what happened with the whole trigger of the George Floyd and everybody suddenly becoming concerned that they're being open to diversity and they're recognizing their peers who are color. So now that that is not in the headlines, it will be interesting to see what happens over the next 2 years. And that will be our challenge. Thank you. I'll mute myself now.
Thanks, Lizzy. So right before we did that, Kevin, you were about to say something, so I want to go back to you, and then we're going to jump into the questions for tonight.
Sure. No, I did not have my handy dandy journal as you were speaking initially, so I didn't get all 5 of your points. Why don't you tell me what they were one by one, and I'll tell you how we are either addressing or failing to address them at the Agile Alliance main conference. Any order you like.
I would just like to jump in and mention that I'm on the organizing group for the Business Agility Conference, which is coming up in New York. So I'm wondering if you want to get that input along with Kevin's question by question, or if you would rather talk about the conferences separately because they are so different in the way they operate.
They're very different, yeah, in the way they operate.
Yeah, and your question, Lisa, is great because one of the reasons that we wanted to hear from multiple conference organizers and speakers is that there's no, like, I think in particular with conferences, there's no one size fits all approach. There's multiple approaches that conferences take to how they're organized, how they review submissions, what they ask for in a submission, things like that. So I think one of the key things we're trying to get at it tonight is to like hear from different perspectives as a means of like just getting that information out there so that we can share that with potential speakers and communicate. These are some of the ways that you might be expected to, like, if you're submitting a proposal, here's some things that that may work at one conference versus another. So I welcome as many perspectives as we have time for.
You're muted, Nono.
I'm not even going to make that joke anymore, right? Okay. So the first point is the application process is daunting and the logistics behind the submission process are not clearly understood.
That one, yeah, that's definitely guilty as charged. We're doing our best to reduce the burden on that. Again, anything I say is just from the perspective of the Agile 20X conference, right? Your mileage may vary at another conference. We receive on average about 2,000 submissions for the conference, of which less than a couple of hundred are going to be picked. So what we tried to do, we're changing these barriers, is we wanted to make sure that these were experienced speakers. Or at least, that's the wrong word to use now. That's what we used to look for, was that you weren't speaking in front of an audience of several hundred people for the first time. And so there was some barriers like, show us a video, show us your past conference speakers. We're trying to eliminate those questions one by one to reduce the burden on the application process. But it's still too much. We're trying to thin it out, but we haven't gotten as far as we want to go to yet. But we're trying to take some of those gatekeeping questions away about what conferences have you spoken at before. We're trying to reduce some of those. Absolutely.
Thanks, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Checking for any other comments.
Well, the Business Agility Conference that's in March, and then there's others online, virtual, that are taking place around the world. So the one in New York is by far not the only one. There we're looking for good stories. And we do want the person to be capable of speaking publicly, but if they've never spoken before, that doesn't mean they wouldn't be selected. We would work with them. We actually actively coach and support speakers to help them craft a story and help them prepare their talk and give them feedback and give them a chance to practice. It's a very small, intimate event because it's always single track. So people don't have a variety to choose from. They're going to get whoever's speaking, that's who they're going to get. So we have a much smaller number of people we accept, but we put a lot of time and energy into those we do accept. Let's see. The process for the Business Agility Conference is to fill out a form online. It's pretty straightforward. I think we may ask if you've submitted in the past. I just wanted to say, as someone who's also submitted to a lot of different types of conferences, both large and small, that the process is different for each. And I would advise you to go to the conference's information page where they tell you, here's the process to become a speaker. And if it doesn't make sense, especially if it doesn't make sense, reach out and say, this doesn't make sense, because you know what, they're people just like the rest of us, and sometimes they mess up on the instructions, right? Or they leave something out, or it's confusing. And so they welcome people telling them, you know, I went to the link and it didn't work, or whatever the problem was, or this part wasn't clear, because then they can fix it. And then just speaking generally about process, I want everyone to remember that there are a lot of wonderful open space events where you don't have to submit anything in advance and you're not chosen as a speaker. Instead, it's a very organic way to have a chance to talk with a group of people, and you, more than selecting you as a speaker, when the open spaces I've been to, it's more about people agreeing on a particular topic that they're really interested in, and then they want to hear from people who have experience in that topic. And so that's a way to bypass the whole admissions process entirely and still have a chance to participate in a public event. And that's, open spaces are a whole separate conversation. If you have not heard about them and you don't understand them, I'd suggest you do some reading, and Nicole and I both know about it. I'm sure there's many other people here who have either hosted or been to open spaces, right? I'm looking to see if there's any raised hands, but maybe raise your hand if you're someone here could reach out to talk about open space. Okay, so Jenny and Nicole and Nono and Matt. So there, the process is pretty much you just register for the event and go, and then you use the process within the open space event itself to get selected. And again, you're not necessarily getting selected as a speaker, but you may have a chance to give a talk. It just depends on how things roll. I know, because I've also been a reviewer for the Agile conferences, and the application is daunting, but as a reviewer, we are more than ready to jump in and help anyone who says, I need feedback, I'm not sure what to put in my submission, I'm confused about how this works. We'll engage in an email exchange, or even in some cases jump on a call with the submitter. Because as reviewers, we're volunteers. Our job is to help everyone who submits craft the best submission that they can. And so there's a whole army of support people available for you to tap. So if you submit that way less than perfect something, and then you, Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is still done for the online conferences as well. You can essentially say, I'd like to get some feedback on my submission.
Yeah, we don't have it. We're not doing online, but yes, we did that last year. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then I would assume for this year that when it's in person, you did the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? You give support. So you can take advantage of that. It's essentially free coaching on how to craft your talk. That's about it I have on that topic.
Thanks, Kevin and Lisa. And so I wanted to switch gears for a second, and actually, like, we're really kind of transitioned and already started answering one of the first questions that we had hoped to address tonight, and that's, how does the conference submission process work? And so I'm wondering if there's someone else who hasn't spoken yet who wants to chime in, and it could be one of the guest speakers or anyone else in the audience who has experience.
Which conference?
I'll leave that up to, I see that April, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I think, so first of all, hey everyone, my name's April Biggs. I'm excited to be here and meet y'all virtually. Hope you guys all are safe and sane. So I know everyone, I feel bad about generalizing it as it's coming out of my mouth. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it sounds like most of the conversation on the call, we're having this like debate of specificity versus specific conference. And so I'll share my own example. I'm hoping that might be helpful. I remember, this is now 2022. I remember 2020 spending my entire year trying to get on. Like I was submitting a conference any place I could get a link, and being told no like every 11 seconds, and it got on my nerves. And so to Lizzy's point about being able to partner with some advocates in this space, like, you know, I reached out to Sheree Silas, like Jesse Fuel, like, how do I get on? What is the cheat code? And it really wasn't until I sat down with Sheree, and also, why can't I think of her name? Lizette Zunon. And essentially, what I know, right? What's the cheat code? I'm about to tell you. The cheat code is that 1, pay attention to the directions. 2, make certain that you understand the nature of the conference. And 3, be real clear about the value that you're delivering. Really simple, like as we say colloquially, straight like that. So the first piece is pay attention to what the goals of the conference are. And so one of the things, and once I understood that, it helped me understand why I wasn't getting my stuff accepted in 2020. So be really clear about how your material or topic either relates to a trend right now or the goals of the conference. And in those details, they typically, every single conference lists bullets about what they're trying to convey. Like, make certain that you're really clear about articulating which of the bullets or which of the points that you're satisfying. And then most of the conferences nowadays, like, they want you to go like the time blocks were where I got screwed up in trying to actually decompose my conversation into how I'm timing it and the messages for the program team. So be really thoughtful about what you're actually putting in each of those, and then take advantage of the open spaces or take advantage of the reviews that folks are offering, because those made the difference. And then once you essentially get a format, it literally is copy paste. You can essentially, once you get your confidence and your feet under you and you got a good format for the workshops that you want to offer, you can literally copy and paste those and put them in to every conference that you want to apply to. But I will say that my recommendation, and this is just my 8 cents for whatever it's worth, you should only be applying and utilizing your cheat sheet for the conferences that are congruent with what you personally believe in, where you feel like your talk is aligned with the values of the conference, and where you feel like you can personally shine. Just don't be out here just like, shooting your shot at everything. Like, that's not going to work. Again, and this is just April. Y'all, is 6:37. I'm not about to code switch now. So y'all are getting me for me. Okay.
All good.
So as part of the Agile conference, I've been working with the Agile Alliance conference for about 10 years, and I've read literally thousands and thousands.
Kevin, I just want to pause for a second. So Christina had her hand up, so I just want to go to her quick using the newcomer rule, and then we'll come back to you.
Hi there. I just wanted to give background. So I had a talk last year in October. I know that's just like a few months ago. And it's the first time that I spoke in the Agile space at a conference, and that was a conference in London. And I have to say, in terms of the submission process, I found that I submitted solely for the purpose of, I felt that I didn't see a lot of what I wanted reflected in the Agile community when I was attending meetups. I felt that it's a little bit self-serving to the same number of people all the time. I attend the meetups, I enjoy them, but after a time it becomes a bit boring because it's usually the same talks and kind of the same conversations. And I have a background in telco and consulting, and switching to Agile and coaching and the benefit and the value that it was supposed to have, I kind of felt lost during that time when I kept on going to so many meetups, and I felt that, we talk about this belonging, but I didn't find it in the community. And as a result of that, I decided that I wanted to talk about that. And that's why I decided to submit to the conference kind of process. So I first submitted to the Women in Agile Launching New Voices. I didn't get through and I didn't hear back from them, but I then submitted to the London Aginex conference and my thing went through and I delivered my talk, and I was really happy that I did, because there are lots of people who reached out to me and kind of said, kind of just focusing on the purpose and the value that Agile is supposed to bring to the work environment. They kind of do feel a bit lost in the community because you keep going to meetups, and you don't necessarily feel like, a belonging sometimes, even when you reach out to people and you kind of go, hey, I want to meet up. And I mean, there are good people in there, but you can get lost along the way. So that's why I chose to kind of submit something to a conference. And it's really about, like, if you have a purpose for your should I say, submission, and that's kind of the only reason why I would submit to the conference process again, because I'm all about motivating people. And I felt that, I didn't find that in the community. I think a lot of the times we can get lost in a lot of the technical frameworks and everything, and then that's it. But in terms of the submission process, I think, like April said, it is a kind of copy and paste. Because of my first submission to the Women in Agile conference, I literally copied and pasted that submission to the Aginex conference, and they accepted it. So whatever you're going to submit to the conference process, it has to be something that you hold dear to you, that it is a purpose, it serves a purpose to you and your voice to the community. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Thanks, Christina. Kevin, we're going to go back to you, and then we'll go to Nicole.
I was just going to say, after reading literally thousands of submissions, I want to talk about two things that Apriel said. Did I say that correctly?
Apriel, long A.
Apriel,
thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Buffalo A's are a little bit weird. We do it strange here. One of the key reasons a lot of talks do not get accepted isn't necessarily the 200 or so word abstract that they give at the top, right? That can get you knocked out if it's not good, right? If it's not compelling, if it's not making a sale. And that's really what this is, right? It's a sales pitch to the people who are going to be coming to the conference. Why should you spend the next 70 minutes of your life in this room with this person? It's the information for the program team on the back where a lot of people lose out, and show that when we talk about not necessarily, are they, have they spoken before, but are they capable of putting a good presentation together? It's those two places where a lot of people come out. Their timings show that they're trying to cram too much material into too short a time. That's evident from a lot of the things on timings. There's a lot of talk about, like, learning outcomes, right? What is someone going to take away from this time that they spend with you? And a lot of people massively overpromise in the learning outcomes. After coming to this talk, you will be an expert in X. And I'm like, no, you're not going to be an expert in anything after 70 minutes. That's just not going to happen. So, what you've done in those cases is you've shown that you haven't really connected your ideas to the value that they're going to deliver people, right? And that's one of the places that you crack the code there, is that you match those things to what people are asking for. And it's really those second learning outcomes and information for the program team where a lot of people reveal that they don't have the chops yet, irrespective of anything else, that they haven't thought this through all the way yet. They may have a germ of a good idea, they may have a good sales pitch, but they haven't thought through the implications of what they're saying. And that's where a lot of inexperienced people get knocked out, right there. A lot of people think that they can just wing it for 70 minutes. And unless you're a really skilled speaker in improv, you're not going to do it. And conferences aren't going to think that you're going to be able to do it. But I just wanted to add that to April, to what you had said. That's absolutely one of the keys to having a successful submission, is showing that you've thought through every box on that form, no matter how many there are.
Thanks, Kevin. Nicole?
Yeah, Kevin said it just before, but I was thinking, focusing on the learning outcomes, like in terms of the submission process, it's like all the before stuff, like before you get to the page where you fill out your name and your topic and all of that stuff is the preparation before that. And the biggest thing I learned was focus on your learning outcomes first, because it's like really what all of this speaking is about. What's in it for me, for the people who are attending? It's like, what are they going to get out of it? So if you think about that first, that really will inform whether you have something that's, good to be in the running. But the other thing that I want to say related to that was, touching to the points that Kevin was speaking about, where, how you lay your stuff out, is partnering with somebody who has done it before is priceless. I mean, I did that with Julie with my first one, because, Julie had spoken at many conferences and I had submitted before too, like several times, and didn't get accepted. And what Apriella says, cracking the code. It's like, I don't know what's wrong. And until you work with somebody who has done it, they're the ones who can show you. It's like, okay, you probably need to work on your learning outcomes, or, rearranging your content. So I'm just saying, work with somebody who has done it, because they can really help you from that perspective.
Thanks, Nicole. Julie?
Yeah, I was just going to add on a little bit to what I think Kevin was mentioning in terms of the timings, often in the section for the program team. I agree that I think when I first submitted, that was definitely some of the initial feedback that I think I would get, and definitely taking advantage of any reviewer feedback is great, that they'd have questions, like how confident are you that you'll be able to fit all of this? And so breaking down those timings is really important. And one of the things that I found to be really effective as well to add confidence to that section is, if you have a new session, to try to utilize your local meetups and run it there first, because you're just guessing when you first design a session. And so if you're going to take it and first try to submit it at one of the really big conferences, you don't really know. But if you can submit it and say, in your submission, not only like, is this my breakdown, but you can tell them, I validated these timings, it gives them more confidence and you can stand behind it. Also, just like we said, all the conferences are so different. It can be really hard because this one's 90 minutes and this one's 75 and this one's 55, this one's 45. But you do want to take that same session and copy paste it each time. But you have to be really careful that you don't copy paste a 75-minute workshop agenda into something that's 55 minutes. So you have to tweak it to make sure that the timings match what you're submitting to. And sometimes I'll take something that is, a 75-minute workshop and we'll say, hey, we're submitting it to a 60-minute slot. We've run it successfully for 75 minutes and it works. And here is the specific section that we're going to take out, or this is the specific section that we're going to shorten. So we're confident that it will fit in your conference in this shortened slot. And that can make it very clear that what you're doing, and that puts a little more confidence behind the timings that you're submitting. So, and it gives you more confidence in your facilitation. And I think also, anything that you do to kind of show your preparation for the facilitation, whether it's the tools you're going to use, or, we have 2 people and this is how we're going to be able to handle the remote aspects or the in-person aspects. It's just that little bit more that shows that you've really thought through I think the aspects helps give a fuller picture than just like, this is my topic and we're going to fill in the details if we get accepted.
Thanks, Julie. We'll go to Lisa, and then we're going to move into the next question after Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I just wanted to encourage everyone who's thinking about this that there's also a lot of value in solo practice at home. Like, if your talk is 45 minutes long, sit down with your plan and your script and your slides and pretend you're giving the talk and just go through it and see if your timing is wildly off. It might be, you might find yourself only talking for 30 minutes when you had planned it to be 45. You just never know. So you run through it, and then that can help you tweak it. And then do it, you can do it. And Nicole was there when I did this once, the very first time I ever gave the cognitive bias talk. I just said to all the people I worked with, hey, I'm working on a talk and I know it needs help. So would you be willing to come and listen to it and then tell me your feedback? And it was just a bunch of, essentially friends that I worked with. And they gave me really valuable feedback. So, there's lots of ways you can run through it and practice. Meetups are really good too, because it's more of a public. But if that feels daunting to you, if you've never spoken before, run through it by yourself, then maybe run through it with a close friend who you can count on to give you honest feedback, but also be kind of nice about it because it's your first time. And then run through it with some nice friends from work or whoever they are, right? And then, you can sort of work your way up, because as you go, you'll learn so much about your own style, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. You'll make little tweaks, and that process itself will give you a lot of confidence. And then people will start giving you feedback and saying, that one little part, I didn't understand that. And you're like, oh, I really better expand on that. And then when you do submit to the conference, you can document the things that you've learned, so that even if you're a first-time speaker, you can, I can tell you this as a reviewer, you can tell when someone has really thought this through, they've practiced it a little bit with small groups. I don't necessarily need to see that they've presented at a bunch of other conferences in the past, or, that they've been at a bunch of meetups, but I do look for that rehearsal. So like Kevin was saying, we can tell right away when somebody's really inexperienced, but there are lots of ways of getting inexperienced. And I wouldn't want to put words in your mouth, Kevin, but I would venture to guess you didn't mean experience talking at big conferences. You meant experience giving this talk, and that you're prepared and you know what you're doing.
Thanks, Lisa. And thanks everybody who contributed to that first question. Moving into the second question, and I think one of the ones that's really important to understand, or want to hear about, is how do conference organizers evaluate the diversity of speaker submissions for conferences?
All right, this one's going to be tricky, so just go with me for a second, all right? We don't evaluate the diversity of the submissions. When you submit, we don't ask any demographic information, so we don't know, right? We don't ask what age or anything else. What we spend our efforts on doing is increasing the diversity of the applicant pool, reaching out to as many places as we can to get people to apply to speak. I'm not going to say that getting accepted to speak is some sort of meritocracy, because we all know that that's not true. But if you were to apply, I would not know anything about you other than your name. Right? That's what I know about you. I may know your name already. Where we do have more of an effect, and this is happening with Agile this year, some changes I made, is that we're increasing the pool of people that we ask directly to speak. We're inviting and curating more speakers. and we're using that as a tool both in the. So I, as conference chair, I have literally the only really cool part of being conference chair is getting to pick the keynote speakers. Everything else is just a bureaucratic nightmare, just like from top to bottom, right? But choosing the keynote speakers is actually fun because it's the chance I have to shape the themes of the conference and what we're going to talk about. And since those are directly under my control, I do make an effort and have, assuming that I can't tell you who all the keynote speakers are because not everyone has signed a contract yet. But that is where I have made, and I'm making a direct effort to make sure that we have a more diverse pool of keynote speakers. Now, the way that our conference works, there is me as the conference chair here. There are 3 program chairs with track chairs beneath them. Jenny Tarwater, who's on the call, is one of them. And we're going to be inviting and curating some speakers to attend there. And they have been given the charge to make sure that those invited speakers are a diverse crowd as well. But when it comes to the open submissions, how do we evaluate the speaker diversity? We don't, right? I don't know anything about you other than your name and what you've given for your submission, which is why we're spending time doing things like this to increase the number of people and submissions we get to go into the pool. Does that make sense?
It's a real challenging topic for conference organizers because in some countries and places, it's like illegal to ask for that demographic information. You have to be really careful and really thoughtful about what you do. I can't speak to anything other than the one conference where I am a conference organizer, the Business Agility Conference. And there it's exactly what Kevin said. It's starting out with recruiting the best people we can find, like just doing a lot of research and digging here, there, and everywhere and trying to find a diverse group of candidates and essentially persuade them to submit. Persuade them that, you know, we will take them seriously and work with them to craft their submission. And, you know, frankly, I feel that because it's a one-track conference and we accept so few speakers, we have a really high rejection rate. But I feel like so many of the submissions are so amazing. I often tell the submitters, you know, keep going, keep submitting. This is a really good talk. I'm real sorry for whatever reason. Like sometimes in our conference, we can only have so many talks on certain topics because we only have like 16 to 18 speakers. So we can't have them all be about finance or all be about HR. You know, we have to balance content as well. We have a lot of things to balance. And so we're forced sometimes to reject really great talks. And so I think every conference would say that happens sometimes. And so I just say, look, there's a lot of other conferences. Please keep submitting. I try to be as encouraging as I can. I think, you know, it's hard as a reviewer. It's hard to say this to people, and I don't know if they believe me, but when people complain to me about how sad they are that they got rejected, I try to say to them, you know, you have no idea how many amazing talks we had to reject. And it's just because of the sheer numbers and the way the process works and trying to balance out the program and the topics that are covered and what's current that year. It might be a reason that actually has nothing to do with your, you know, being a woman of color or being from a foreign country or anything else. It might be some other reason. And so I try to be as encouraging as I can, like keep submitting, keep at it. Don't give up. You have a wonderful story to tell and the world needs to hear your perspective.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll do Dina and then Julie.
Yeah, so it was brought up by Lisa and Lizzy and Christina, but my question was, wouldn't they see your demographics in not only they could look you up on LinkedIn by your name, but also your submission video would have you speaking. You would see the demographics there. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying anything except that wouldn't that be the case?
Well, yeah, of course. I'll just, again, I can only speak for myself, right? I personally, when I was reviewing and even as track chair and program chair, now conference chair, one of the reasons I'm taking away on getting on the videos of previous presentations is I never watched them, right? I'm not sure how translatable they are to another space. I'm not sure that you can really gain that much from seeing someone speaking in front of a meetup with 20 people to speaking in front of, 600 or 700. I'm not sure how transferable that is. And this is another reason I did it. I didn't want to be biased toward people who had a video to present. Not everyone does, right? So I didn't want to hold it against people. If you didn't have a video, that's the reason you weren't selected. And then I never looked up someone's information on LinkedIn, right? I only got a LinkedIn account myself about a month ago, but because I hated LinkedIn. I stopped. My little 10-second anecdote. I dropped LinkedIn when an old college girlfriend recommended me for JavaScript, and then emailed me asking what JavaScript was. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe this isn't really helping that much. But no, we don't want to. I don't want to know anything other than what's on the page in front of me. Are there people who don't think that way? I'm sure that there are.
Thanks, Kevin. Julie, then Christina.
I'm just going to share, I only remember one experience, and I don't even know if they still do it this way, but I recall submitting to one conference where they actually called out, they described that it was essentially a blind submission process, that that when they were reviewing, they didn't actually even have your name. So essentially, like, the reviewers just had your session information. It was a smaller regional conference. So just sharing, that was a slightly different approach. Obviously, they had it, you submitted it, and then at some point they responded to you. But in terms of the actual reviewers, when they were looking at it, they didn't see, oh, Julie Wyman submitted on this topic. They just saw, oh, it's a feedback workshop. This is the description. Do we want this session? So it wasn't actually associated to your name. So it's just an interesting, different approach. They still asked information about, were you an experienced speaker? It was like, just yes, somewhat, like they had some basic information that they requested, but they didn't have your name. So it wasn't maybe just like off of the recognizableness of who you were. But that was one. And like I said, I have applied to a lot, and that was the only one that I think was trying it that way. I don't know if they still do it that way. I need to share.
Yeah. Now, I just wanted to add, for me, I would definitely not want to be chosen to speak at a conference based on demographics or the fact that I fit a demographic bill. So I'm happy for it to be agnostic. I think in terms of, as people of color, we need to either, find the spaces or find allies who are actually willing to help with you along your journey. Because what I have found is that if you are in smaller communities, because I went to tons of meetups, I find that the voices and the other new voices that are advanced, they look a lot like the other people who are holding meetups. And it's because people tend to see potential in people who look like them. And that is unconscious bias. It's just a known thing. People go, oh, that young man right there, he has lots of potential. He doesn't have tons of experience, but I see his potential. And in the Agile space, it's all about mindset. And for some reason, if they have a talk with me, they go, "Oh, that was an interesting talk," but they don't go, "Oh, she has years of experience," but we might question her mindset because she worked for this long in a particular experience, in a particular field. So I don't want to be chosen for demographics, but I think we need to acknowledge that in terms of the voices that are kind of being helped and mentored along the way, a lot of people choose people who look like them.
No question.
Thanks, Christina. Jenny?
Yeah. So I'm going to try to edit all my thoughts on this topic because I have lots and I spend lots of time thinking about this particular topic, and I don't have great solutions, and any ideas are welcome. Please share them so we can continue to improve. I've been involved with 7 or 8 different conferences in my life, and there is not the same answer at any of them. For PMI, literally, they print out your LinkedIn picture and put it up on a wall, of which I can say, I can't even remember whose talk is whose, because these are all, white males that are about 50 years old. Like, it's a wall of white. And I'm like, this is not what we should be doing. And that helped them to see an issue, right? So I was appreciative of that happening. Not all diversity shows up on a picture, right? So I don't know how to solve for that without asking for demographics. I do want to share one step that I've taken, small step, but I hope that it makes a difference. As one of the track chairs for the Agile 22 conference, I made sure our review team was as diverse as I could possibly manage, including, US based versus not, experienced versus not. And one of the challenges I had was there were folks that had not even been a reviewer. So it was hard to say, like, be a review lead. So I made sure that we had a lot of the reviewers that we can have for future conferences that can do that. But hopefully that more diverse review group can lead to better things.
Thanks, Jenny. Lizzy?
One of the things I think that is helpful when you're thinking about conferences and speaking, we tend to, in our space, a lot of times be a bit slide driven when we're doing conferences. So the only people who tend to be a little away from slides, and I said only tend to be a little, maybe keynote speakers that you're paying money to, right? Because they tend to be a little bit more dynamic in nature naturally, because that's why they get paid to speak. However, I do think we need to think about when we are submitting or when we are reviewing that you want the session to be compelling and not just academic. And a lot of our stuff is so flipping academic, right? That if you were going, a lot of our people who speak, if they wanted a real speaking career, they wouldn't get picked up because they're boring. And the only reason they keep getting in our spaces is because they've been in our spaces a long time and we look at them as, oh, we revert them. They're not dynamic. And I think one of the things we need to start doing with our conferences is thinking about, actually mentoring people to be dynamic speakers, to know how to modulate their voices, to draw people in, to drop the silences, have people considering, so that our conferences are more like conferences and not just conferences because there are industry stuff. Just my 2 cents, because I do speak at conferences elsewhere, and you've got to kind of bring something to the table so people are like, oh, I want to go hear that person speak. Yeah, they're cool. Rather than, I guess we should go listen to them. I mean, do you know what I mean? Because our conferences aren't cheap either. Come on. I mean, we spend money for our conferences. We do, which is why we bring in such amazing keynote speakers. But we're not bringing in great people who are dynamic on our stages. I mean, what's that about? It's a question to ask ourselves, right?
PowerPoint has killed us.
Thanks, Lizzy. Go ahead, Kevin.
I'll add like 30 seconds of something to that. To anyone who's doing a speech, who's going to write a talk, you are writing a speech. If I could offer a single piece of advice as a speaker, don't pick up PowerPoint or Keynote until you're done. Write a talk, write a speech, and extract slides out of it. Practice a speech all the way through that lasts, and then open up PowerPoint. That's it. You'll get to what Lizzy's talking about that way.
Thanks, Kevin. We're going to switch gears a little bit and actually open it up to the audience, or like anyone here. If we haven't heard from you yet, in particular, 2 questions to consider. Like, what's your experience been like if you've applied to conferences? Or is there anything that prevents you from wanting to apply to conferences in the first place? So if there's anyone who wants to raise their hand and chime in about either of those questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Or you can put it in the chat.
Okay, well, we don't have any yet. If anyone changes their mind, we'll come back to you. We do have a few other questions to tackle. Oh, yeah. Thanks for talking about it. Thanks, Dana. 2 other questions we could tackle. One, let's start with this one. Do you have to be an experienced speaker, or can new speakers submit sessions to conferences? Some of you touched on this, but I want to just come back to this question and address this one.
It's definitely a higher bar if you're a new speaker, just because you don't know the process or how to construct things properly. But a good submission is a good submission in the end. For those who are interested, who wants some help crafting a submission, you can find me at @KevDog on Twitter, and I'm willing to help anyone out if they reach out. But of course you can do it. And I will also tell you forthrightly that if you're, Joanna Rothman or Esther Derby, and yeah, we know your name, there's a good chance you're going to get in, right? But I will also say that 3 years ago, I got roughly stopped in the hallway by a well-known Agilist who was mad at me for not picking his session. And it was because his submission sucked. There's really no other way to put it. It was terrible. It basically said, I'm a big shot, you should listen to me for 70 minutes. And I'm like, you know what? If you're not even gonna fake it to do the submission, I don't have time for that, There are other people who put it in and took it seriously, who got it in the conference. And yeah, it was ugly, but dude, it was terrible. What do you want,
That was at Kevin, what?
KevDog, KEVDOG.
Thanks, Kevin. Jenny, Nicole, and Christina.
So imagine yourself as a conference organizer. Imagine yourself as the person that is looking through all of the list of submissions and trying to make a determination. What would help you decide and build a program that you can be proud of, right? And so, although being an experienced speaker is a data point, and it builds some confidence that you've gone through it. You've gone through the nerves before the talk. You know how to get up there and breathe, and how to answer questions, and these things that you gain through experience. There's other ways to build that confidence for the folks that are selecting. Like, you can say, I am not an experienced speaker. I have a speaking mentor who I will be practicing with, or I have scheduled this talk at 4 meetups before the conference, something that helps them see that you're putting in the work to deliver. The other thing I would say is, in any conference I've been involved with, just like Kevin just did, almost all the organizers are going to be willing to spend some time with you to say, this is what we're looking for, or yes, let me look at what you have and give you some feedback. I offer that quite often and I don't get that offer taken up very much. So if you have any idea of how I can increase my reach in those offers, let me know.
Thanks, Jenny. Nicole?
Well, I'm just going to reflect back onto my first talk, and a lot of what opened the door for me was that it was a local or a regional conference, and they did open a track for new voices specifically. So that's as far as it went. Obviously, no demographics, but they did focus on new voices. So, chances are this will create an avenue for people we haven't heard from before, right? But like I said, that's just one part of it when you're new. All of the other things everybody has said about finding ways to practice, documenting how you're going to practice, are definitely helpful. Partnering, finding your mentor, and all of those things. But if you can, for that first time, if you find those more regional conferences that have offered that, that's also a great avenue in.
Hi. So I'll say, as a new speaker, what you need to have is a compelling blurb for your talk. I mean, literally, when I came up with my talk, I literally was up at like 2 a.m. in the morning, kind of thinking about what is it that I want to say to the community, and then making points about it, and then revisiting it a couple of days and go, how would I say these words and how would I put them together? And I think if you have problems in terms of how you put words together, find friends in the community who will help you to find those words, and people who will help you to find what your voice sounds like. So as a new speaker, for the Aginex conference that I went to in London, they have a Slack group for the speakers, and all of us were together and sending out a message kind of to the other speakers going, hey, when I'm doing my presentation, is there anybody who's willing to review with me? There are other speakers who are willing to help review your talk with you. I felt comfortable in being able to speak because in terms of attending the meetups, I spoke at meetups. I asked questions. And then when you start asking questions, you become less panicked about, oh my God, everybody's going to look at me speaking. Oh my God, oh my God. So that for me was my preparation to kind of going, ooh, I do have a voice in this community and I feel that I can tell a story. And my review team, even with all of that feeling that I had a purpose, you definitely need a review team that will keep you on track, because I literally bombed when I did my review with my 2 people, and they were just like, they're like, I know what you're trying to say, and I know you really care about this, but just a couple of questions. So you have to have a review team that you trust, where you will not get defensive and not take it personally when they try to hold you to your why, because you have to have people along the way to help you, because no matter how much you are driven by purpose, sometimes you can get in your own way and just ramble a bit. And yeah, you need to review. And as a new speaker, you can do it and you can get chosen. Just find the right words to be compelling. And it's pretty much kind of just this kind of marketing and how you want to sell your talk.
Thanks, Christina. Julie?
Just going to offer, I agree with everything everyone has been saying in terms of practicing in safe spaces and just getting really great feedback that way. I don't think I have any sessions I've ever created from scratch that haven't run for, internal groups, friends, colleagues, that haven't resulted in rather significant revisions, like really significant, like sometimes quite changing the session from what I thought its purpose was. So I think they can be really valuable. That said, I've also had the experience where you can get a lot of feedback, whether it's like for the actual session itself or just like crafting the submission. And it can be really varied because people are different and they have different perspectives and they have different styles. And so if you're getting feedback from a reviewer, I think that can be really great because they are the reviewers for that conference and they're going to give you good perspective. But it doesn't mean that you have to take it all. I think that you need to stay true to your submission. I think people have said getting accepted at a particular conference is not the most important thing. And what works for, one person may not work for you. So I think you should hear it. I think you should think about why they're saying it and what it comes from. And then you should decide what that means and what you want to take and what you don't, because people have very different styles, very different experiences, and it's coming from different places. So take it, think about it, but then decide what feedback you want to take and what feedback you don't for the session that you want to give, because the end goal isn't to speak at a conference. It's to speak about something, like everyone said, that you're excited about, to engage with the community on your terms. So to share.
Thanks, Julie. We're going to go to Lizzy and then Lisa, and then we're going to move to close the meeting.
The comment I would use is the golden circle. I mean, everybody's seen Simon Sinek's thing, but it's really valuable to go back to that particular piece about the golden circle and just think about the fact that the whole conference long, you've got to keep people engaged and they've got to keep hearing why it's important to them. So whatever your messaging is that you're passionate about, you have got to be able to hook that passion to everybody else in the way that you present it in, what we kind of call that, the tasty blurb that makes people go, oh yeah, this would be a really good one to bring into the conference. You've got to keep that. And that's only going to come from an authentic place because you can't fake that. So it's really important to, whenever you come up with your topic, to think about, okay, well, what's your why? Where does your passion come from on this? So then when you have your passion, you can think about utilizing that technique. Why would that matter to everybody else in the conference? And how are you going to deliver them at least 2 or 3 tips that's going to help them get some kind of value even after you finish speaking? What can they take away? And if you think about it like that, that your speaking is a product that you're giving in this short little time, what's valuable and what's usable about it to somebody else who's going to hear it. That'll help you to craft something that's, good and yours.
Give him a call when the party starts.
Thanks, Lizzy. Lisa?
Yeah, Lizzy pretty much said what I was going to say, which is, think about the participants sitting there listening to you, and when they walk out of that room or when they finish the Zoom session, whichever it may be, what are the 2 or 3 things that you want them to remember? What are their key takeaways? And make sure that everything else in your talk drives towards those key things, and that those key things are something that really matter to you. And, one way to think about it is you've probably been to conferences and you've noticed some topics or some aspects of things that we're missing. Why aren't people talking about XYZ? Why aren't they delving into this problem I've been observing? Whatever it may be, whatever you really care about. And choose something that resonates in your heart, that really drives you and makes you, it's a topic you could sit and talk with another Agilist for a couple of hours over drinks. I mean, it's just something really important to you. And then think about those 2 or 3 takeaways. You said it perfectly, Lizzy. And then craft your talk around that, and that will give it the authenticity, right? It's hard sometimes to have authenticity when you say to yourself, oh, I need to be authentic, but how do I be authentic? And you get caught in that. And if the focus is really instead on what do you care about? And when you go to these conferences, what's missing? And the things that you see that are missing, those are the things you can offer to the community back as a gift. Because essentially your talk is a gift to the community. You're filling a gap for something that they're not seeing or they're not discussing. And you can offer that to them.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that's a great way to end. So I want to start to wrap up, first of all, by thanking Lizzy and Lisa and Julie and Kevin and April, Christina and Jenny for sharing their knowledge and wisdom with us. And also thank everyone else here for taking time out of your schedule to be here, for your questions, just for listening in. We really want to get this information out there to as many potential speakers as possible, as well as also we're going to collect information to share with conference organizers, for their consideration for future conferences. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to tell us a little bit about another upcoming Agile In Color event.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So hopefully you can see my screen. But I did want to share with you what we have coming up next for Agile In Color. So in February, we will be having our next quarterly Share Your Story. So we do this series once a quarter, which is kind of like an interview conversation with Black Agilists to kind of highlight their Agile journey from people of color perspective. So Alicia McLean is a professional coach and works with organizational leaders to build cultures of accountability and greater agility. And that's who we'll be talking about in this session. And so Alicia is going to share her story with us and her experiences as a Black woman in tech and in the Agile community. So I'm very excited to hear her story, and I hope that you will join us. And that will be on Thursday, February 10th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just register on Meetup.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nicole. And thanks again to everybody for being here. Just very grateful for you all for sharing tonight and for being here. So we look forward to seeing you at a future event and wish you all successful and healthy and happy 2022. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.